Okay, let's unpack this. We are traveling back in time, way back to the Kingdom of Denmark.
Specifically to the farmlands of rural Jutland in the 19th century.
And we are focusing on one single life, a life that serves as this really profound historical bridge for you, our listener, Marty Boy Die.
Our mission today is to trace the history of Mette Jesperdatter. She was born in 1795,
Wow.
and her life, I mean, it completely spans the transition from, the old feudal agrarian state to the very beginning of modern Danish democracy.
And she's the fifth great-grandmother on your full maternal line. Her story is remarkable, I think, precisely because of how rooted she was in a world that was just constantly shifting under her feet.
It really was.
We've got a rich stack of source material here, meticulous genealogical timelines, Danish census and church records, and some really great historical context for her specific region.
Right. The parishes of Fær, Sporup, and Gurn in Skanderborg.
So we're going to piece together Mette's story, which is all about stability and tradition, and then follow the, radical journey of her daughter, Helena.
And what's so fascinating is seeing how the massive political and agricultural landscapes of Denmark really shaped Mette's immediate world.
It's not always the big city stories that tell you the most.
Exactly. It's the lives lived in a small parish like Sporup that truly show the weight of historical change.
Okay, so let's begin where all deep dives must, at the beginning.
Mette Jesperdatter was born and christened on March 11th, 1795, in Sporup.
And her parents were Jesper Rasmussen, who was 48, and Karen Fransdatter, who was 32.
Yeah, that age difference, 16 years, is pretty notable right from the start.
Definitely. And the world she's born into, the late 18th century, it's overwhelmingly agricultural.
Oh, completely. Our sources confirm something like 80% of Danes lived in rural areas. They were, directly dependent on the soil.
So her life is immediately framed by this massive societal reorganization.
I think we really have to linger on that context because it's the engine driving her entire life. Her childhood from 1795 to about 1805 coincides with the very heart of the Great Danish Land Reforms.
And it's almost impossible to overstate how big a deal these reforms were.
It is. Before all this, you had the old communal open field system. Everyone farmed little strips of land clustered around a village.
Right.
But the reform movement just broke that all up. It consolidated the fields, and suddenly farmers were encouraged to move out of that tight village structure.
And build their own individual independent farms.
Exactly. So even though Mette's family probably stayed in the same parish, their physical and economic life would have changed profoundly.
We can reasonably speculate, then, that her family saw that shift firsthand.
Yes.
From communal farming to this new individualized land ownership.
That's the foundation she inherited, and it was coupled with a really revolutionary legal change. Mette was part of the first generation to benefit from the abolition of the stavsbånd.
Okay, that's a crucial term we need to define, because it's the key to understanding the freedom her daughter would later use. What exactly was the stavsbånd?
Well, think of it as a kind of serf-like bond. It legally tied young men, male peasants, to the estate or the parish where they were born.
So you couldn't leave.
You could not. It was designed to ensure a constant supply of soldiers for the army and, stable labor for the landowners. If Mette had been born just 50 years earlier, her father might literally not have been allowed to leave Sporup.
Wow.
It started to be abolished in the late 1700s, but it wasn't fully gone until 1848.
So Mette, growing up in the early 1800s, is surrounded by men, her brothers, her cousins, who are finally tasting this new freedom of movement.
And the irony, as the sources show, is that despite this new mobility, Mette's family, like a lot of rural Danes, they chose stability.
They stayed rooted.
They did. But the freedom to choose that rootedness, that's fundamentally different from being legally forced to stay.
We also have to acknowledge the geopolitical chaos happening around her as she's becoming an adult.
Right. By 1814, Denmark was reeling from the Napoleonic Wars.
They had sided with France, and they lost Norway to Sweden because of it.
A massive reshaping of the national consciousness happening just as Mette was getting ready to marry. It kind of cemented this new national identity focused inward on Danish land and culture.
The very land Mette lived on.
It's also worth pausing to just appreciate the sources we have. This detail is only here because of the Danish government's dedication to record keeping.
Right, the 1812 ordinance.
Yes, it's standardized parish registers requiring duplicate copies of everything. That diligence is why we can talk about Mette's life today.
So she comes of age in this time of internal stability but external defeat. At age 26, on June 2nd, 1821, She marries Niels Lauridsen.
And they established their home right there in the community she grew up in. They settled in Far, which is part of the Sport parish.
And the family starts almost right away.
Mm-hmm.
On January 20th, 1822, their daughter, Helena Jesperdatter Nielsen, was born.
And Helena, of course, is the critical ancestral link for you, Marty.
But the years that followed their marriage were defined by something else, just profound, successive loss.
This part of Mette's life really paints a stark picture of the era. Between 1826 and 1829, Mette navigated this incredible series of tragedies.
First, in January 1826, her own mother, Karen, dies. And she was only 30 years old.
So young. And Mette gives birth to another daughter, Karen Maria, just 3 months later in April.
To lose your mother right then, it's just devastating.
And the grief didn't stop. Her father, Jesper, died in January 1828. So within 2 years, she's lost both of her parents.
And is caring for 2 very young children.
Then, maybe the most heartbreaking event of all, in April 1829, that second daughter, Karen Maria, died. She was only 3.
Wow. To lose your parents and then a child, all in a few years, while running a farm, it just speaks volumes about her resilience.
It really does. I mean, the sources just give us the dates, but the context tells us that high childhood mortality was just a painful, common reality.
The community, the church.
Yeah.
It all had to be incredibly strong to get people through that.
It did. But Mette and Niels continued, rooted in that very community. Later that same year, in 1829, they had another child, and Jesperdatter.
And this brings us to Mette's middle years, which we can track with amazing specificity because of the Danish censuses.
These records provide, irrefutable evidence of their stability.
That's the word for it. We have census records from 1834, 1840, 1845, and 1850. For almost 2 decades, they are consistently recorded as residents of Sporup. They simply did not move.
This profound rootedness, which might seem unremarkable to us, was a really significant choice, given the legal freedom her generation had.
I noticed a little detail in the records, something genealogists probably see all the time.
What's that?
The 1845 census lists her correctly as Mette Jesperdatter, daughter of Jesper. But the 1850 census has her down as Mette Jorgensdatter.
Yes. That little discrepancy, Jesperdatter versus Jorgensdatter, is a great reminder that these records, while meticulous, were written by local clerks.
So a clerical error, or maybe just how it sounded to them?
Exactly. It's a challenge researchers face, but all the other details, like her birth year and location, they confirm it's the same person.
So, as Mette is entering the last years of her life, she sees one final, massive political earthquake. The end of the world she was born into.
We're talking about 1849, just 2 years before her death. This was the pivotal moment when Denmark transitioned from an absolute monarchy,
Where the king's power was unlimited.
to a constitutional monarchy.
I mean, just think about that for a moment. She
Yeah.
was born a subject of a king who, derived his authority from God. She lived her entire life under that structure.
And then at age 54, she sees a democratic constitution implemented, granting rights and political freedoms to the common man.
It's an almost unbelievably rapid shift from a basically feudal structure to a modern state, all wrapped up in her final years.
Mette Jesperdatter died 2 years later on April 1st, 1851, in Varia at the age of 56.
Buried 1 week later in the parish, she had called home her entire life. Her world began and ended right there on the land of Sporup.
And that stability which defined Mette is what makes the journey of her daughter, Helena, such a radical, striking contrast.
Yes, Mette's rootedness paved the way for Helena's revolutionary departure.
Helena, born in 1822, she married Mikkel Sorensen in 1845. They also started their family right there in Fire. They had 5 children.
And a quick genealogical nugget about those kids. When they were first born, they were registered using the older system, patronymics.
Right, so they'd be called Mikkelsen, meaning son of Mikkel.
But because of that same bureaucratic modernization Mette saw, new laws required families to adopt a consistent, heritable surname.
So they transitioned from the traditional Mikkelsen to the permanent family name, Sorensen.
This shift from, traditional naming to modern bureaucracy, it kind of parallels the much larger decision they made in the 1860s.
It does. Helena and Mikkel were influenced by the growing mission of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints and chose to emigrate to America, to the land of Zion.
And this decision wasn't just religious, was it? It was also profoundly economic and social.
Oh, absolutely. It was fueled by population growth, economic hardship, the same things that pushed so many to leave Europe in the mid-19th century.
The freedom of movement that Mette's generation finally got was now being used for mass migration.
In 1863, the family sold everything. We have some fantastic specific details about this journey. Mikkel and Helena were both 47.
And their 5 kids ranged from 17 all the way down to little 3-year-old Rasmus.
Imagine that scene, April 30th, 1863. They leave Copenhagen, and the source notes that a great number of people congregated on the wharf to see the saints leave.
It must have been just a chaotic mix of excitement and sorrow.
They took a steamer to Kiel, Germany. From there, they had to walk to the railway station, then another walk, a half-hour trek, to Hamburg to board the big ship.
Which was the Roland.
Yes, and the description of the conditions on board is incredibly visceral. They joined nearly 600 other emigrants, but the source makes a very specific note. The ship was also carrying about 40 stores and several hundred sheep.
Wait, with several hundred sheep, I'm just trying to picture 600 people stuck on a ship with livestock for a transatlantic journey.
The source notes the atmosphere was anything but comfortable for the emigrants. You can just imagine the smell, the cramped quarters.
It's the stark opposite of the quiet, stable farm life Mette knew.
It truly is. They finally sailed from Liverpool, England, on May 6, 1863, marking the radical end of their connection to the Danish soil.
So Mette Jesperdatter's life was defined by the deep soil of Sporup. She saw feudalism dismantled and democracy born, yet she remained rooted until her death in 1851.
And that very stability created the space for freedom. Her daughter, Helena, used the legal liberty that Mette's generation had just barely obtained, the freedom from the Stavsbånd, to make that incredible leap across the world.
Yeah, it just shows the power of a single generation to completely redefine a family's destiny.
It does.
So that source material, it mentions the crowds on the Copenhagen wharf watching the saints leave. Here's a thought for you to mull over.
Consider Mette, who never strayed from far, Sporup. What would she have thought if she could have stood there on that wharf, watching her daughter Helena, her son-in-law, and all 5 of her grandchildren sailing away from the Danish land that had defined her entire quiet existence? What do you think she would have felt?